weakest link, some people might call Greece a weakest link in a sense that we had our problems and brought out the difficulties. But on the other hand, you might say Germany could be the weakest link if it doesn't take the necessary steps to, or it pulls in the wrong direction in a sense. Very strong, but might pull in the wrong direction and Europe face problems.
The eurozone seems to be a situation where today you can't quite unscramble a scrambled egg. Do you think that the creation of the eurozone was a good idea?
There may be, theoretically, a return into renationalization and a breakup, but I think it's much less a possibility now. And the will in the European Union is, of all the political establishment and leaders, is not to have a breakup of the euro. So I think there's a very strong political will that we move forward on this. But of course, if we did have the hindsight, I think we would have wanted to put in place a number of mechanisms: stronger banking union, more fiscal monitoring, more common economic policies, possibly more transfers of resources to strengthen some of the economies that are in the periphery, some of the institutions in the periphery, so that we use the money in a more transparent and more effective and more growth-oriented way.
5 years after the global financial crisis, one of the things that's still quite heavily discussed is the banking system around the world. Do you think the banks in Greece and across Europe are well capitalized today?
Well, before I get to the banking system, which is very important, I would say that what Lehman Brothers tells us is I think a lack or it's one of our problems in our democracies. We needed to have more transparency. We needed to have more understanding. We needed to have more institutional oversight of the financial system. Because what happened was we were being told that these AAA bonds being sold to all over the world, not only in the United States, but to the Europeans and to others, were AAA. And in fact, they were junk bonds. So it was somewhat of a fraud, to be very clear about it. I'm somewhat unhappy that 5 years later, we still have lingering problems in our banking sector. And people mistrusting each other, banks and governments and banks, even investors. And I think we really need to put an end to this by, on the one hand, recapitalizing the banks. Now what's happened is, because of the financial crisis, still lingering on after 5 years, many banks are looking at their accounts and they're not looking at the real economy. They're not looking at finding investors to invest, to make the economy move. And of course, that at the same time, there's not much interbank lending either. So this kind of problem is still holding our economy back.
Do you think Europe's growth is more heavily tied to the US, or do you see it as being more reliant on Asia?
I don't want to be absolute on this, but I think that the US is more linked with the Chinese economy, but I think the European economy is quite crucial for the Chinese economy also, in the exports of Chinese goods to the European Union. But I think more and more, if you think about it, it's a well-known fact, or maybe not that well-known, but the European economy altogether is still the biggest economy in the world. Therefore, when the European economy is in recession, that affects the whole world. I think there are many areas where there can be partnerships. I think the area of green growth and green technology is important. There have been a lot of discussions recently about Chinese imports of green technology into the European Union. But I think we need to really open up our markets in a way, as long as we have clear standards.
Would you run for Prime Minister again?
Oh, that's a good question. That's I think one has to philosophize in life and say that I've done what I've done. I can't be sure about the future, but I'll help my country in any way I can.